Well, welcome everyone. I acknowledge my tardiness and will not apologize for it. That was one of the first things Julia ever taught me, is that we arrive right when we're supposed to. However, I will blame it on something, which was unpredicted construction on 29th and my own monkey mind, which was happily distracted by wonderful things that are happening in my life right now. So it's a good way to come in late to a responsibility. So thank you all for allowing me to facilitate this meeting today. Welcome to Thursday morning's Spokane Recovery Dharma. I haven't done this in a long time. I used to do this every Wednesday during COVID for quite some time, and then life got busy. And so I've been a participant since life got busy. Professionally, I facilitate groups about 12 hours a week. So luckily, my anxiety is mixed with confidence from years of experience. So I'm going to sit with that rather than the anxiety. But I'm also going to allow both of those things to be true at the same time. This month, we are exploring the 4 Brahma Viharas, the limitless qualities. These are the qualities that in Buddhism, from a more traditional approach, are meant to be cultivated through our practice. So I want to explore these qualities with you today during our meditation in a perhaps slightly unconventional way. These qualities are often very other-focused. Metta often involves focusing on others, focusing on community. It can be done in several different ways. One way I've often liked to do it is to start with myself and then expand my awareness out. As a person living in recovery, living with substance use disorder, and I have a prolonged period of abstinence, and then also being in recovery from generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD, the self-focus is often more of a struggle than the other focus. It's often easier to have compassion for others than oneself. That's been my experience. And as there's an abundance of practices out there that is very other-focused with these things, compassion, recognizing the suffering of others, how equanimity includes others, all of that, I thought it might be helpful to internalize these practices a little bit. So whether you are here in recovery from substance use disorder or working with other types of habit energy, or for whatever reason you're in this meeting today, may this practice bring you a heightened awareness of your own internal capacity to exist and to learn how to suffer with skill. So the first of these qualities, metta, or loving kindness, shares a root with the Pali words for both friendship and gentleness. So loving kindness is the most common translation of that word. But another way of thinking about it or translating it is gentle friendliness. So however you think of the word, however you translate it, however you make it true for you, metta is simply metta. It is challenging to understand for me. However, when I let go of trying to define it and simply focus on experiencing it, I feel like my understanding of it is expanded. Understanding without words is a challenge. But mindfulness practice, breath focus can help us to do that. So this loving kindness in the Buddhist practice is often, as I said, transmitted to others, but we're also taught to not forget ourselves in that. So while metta can be thought of as a wishing well for others, we can also think of it as a wishing well for ourselves. Metta can be a reminder to take stock of our progress and also to hold our struggle at the same time. So I'd like us to take a few moments of silence to simply sit with this concept of metta and perhaps contemplate how you can use metta to work with your own habit energy in a more skillful or self-compassionate way. So letting go of that concept and coming back from that silence, what came up for me during those moments of silence was a slightly expanded awareness of what my current practice or focus is in my self-care and my ongoing individuation and growth into the being that I am today, which is letting go of the dominant aspect of my core identity being so attached to being a person in recovery. I want that part of my ego to get smaller, and it has been other people's metta towards me that's shown me that it's time to start growing out of that. And that is a challenge, because what else am I? There is metta in that awareness for me. The next one, karuna or compassion, can be understood as what happens when metta meets suffering. So when I become aware of the pain of letting go of that being how I define myself, perhaps there is some karuna in that. Compassion is caring about and being present for the pain we all experience. It is that quivering of the heart or that flutter of awareness when we encounter suffering and pain. A natural response to that is to avert ourselves from it, to run from it, or to try to numb it or escape it. Also, the awareness that attaching to that can cause further suffering. So in compassion, the intention is to care for the suffering of ourselves and others rather than pushing it away. So being able to sit through the suffering rather than trying to alter it. It's the part of the practice that allows us to suffer and perhaps even causes suffering to lessen through acclimating ourselves to it. So again, let's take a few moments of silence to explore how that might apply to working with habit energy in whatever capacity feels right for you. So, acknowledging what came up during those moments of silence, what I saw in my own practice there was having some compassion with where I'm currently at with my habit energy and accepting it for being just as it needs to be today, while also holding my desire to change the habit energy that I still have. My relationship with nicotine, food, and screen time are my main focuses today. The challenge there is that the suffering that is induced by those behaviors is nothing compared to the suffering that I came from in my past. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being worse, if it's not a 10, if it's not a 7, if it's not even a 5, why should I change it? What's the point? So I remind myself of that. I remind myself that these are habits that I don't want to change for today or tomorrow or even next month, but these are habits that I want to change for next year, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I want to be an old man with strong bones and a healthy heart and a non-fatty liver who's read a lot of books and is really good at music and art. Binge eating, watching, and using nicotine are not going to get me to that. So I work with it. So I am slowly weaning myself off of those things and acknowledging that progress is progress. And I'll get there when I'm ready, and I don't have to rush it. And it's okay that those things make me feel good. I can accept that there's more pleasure that comes from those things than suffering and still have the goal of trying to change them. And that kind of compassion for myself leads to positive behavioral changes rather than trying to beat myself into a corner where I stop wanting it. I'm not going to stop wanting it, but I can work with that. The next one, mudita, or appreciative joy. The Pali word mudita is sometimes translated as sympathetic joy or empathetic joy, but we can also think of it as appreciative joy. When we think of it as appreciative joy, it can help us to think of how mudita relates to our own happiness. Those other translations, sympathetic or empathetic, are pretty other-focused. Seems to need to involve another being. But really, appreciative joy or mudita has a lot to do with how our metta can lead to joy. So metta becomes compassion when it meets suffering, and it becomes mudita when it meets joy. There's an interconnectivity between these concepts. There is a sort of progression that happens, which is interesting for a Buddhist practice. It's often so non-linear, but there is some connection between these concepts. So mudita, or appreciative joy, can be a sharing of joy, and it can be when we experience joy ourselves. What there is to work with here can be exploring how we allow ourselves to feel joy, rather than trying to convince ourselves that we don't deserve it, or that joy and suffering should not be connected, or a sense of the impermanence of joy, the fear that the pleasant states of being won't last very long, and that we're doomed to return to those negative states of being. A common human experience is when we're in a negative emotional state, it can feel timeless. It can feel as though it's going to last forever. And therefore we have to escape it, we have to alter it, we have to change it. And when we experience a positive state, it can feel like it's not going to last for very long at all, and like it's very temporary, and we can fear the end of it, hence attempting to extend it or make it last longer or make it bigger or better. So we'll take a few moments of silence to explore how that might relate to working with our own habit energy. Breathing through what comes up, allowing the truth to be the truth. Now, letting go of that concept, what came up for me during those moments of silence was nothing at all to do with that concept. My mind wandered. And I looked at the timer and I thought, that's probably enough time in silence with that particular one. Which kind of transitions nicely into the last concept of these four, upekkha, or equanimity. I've heard equanimity defined as to be equally near to all things. It's a balancing factor that keeps us stable in the opening of the heart. So as we practice with these concepts and we explore the interconnectedness of the subtleties between some of these mind states, there can be a sense of instability that comes along with that challenge of balancing awareness of the other, awareness of self. So upekkha is the quality of remaining stable in the midst of everything. It helps us to not completely base our happiness on the actions and feelings of others. It's a container of balance that helps hold all of the others, all of the other qualities, the Brahma Viharas. Some other words that can be used in association with equanimity are acceptance, patience, and stability. So when we practice with equanimity, recognizing that the happiness and suffering of another person is dependent on the person's actions. So it can be helpful to have a phrase to go along with that. One common phrase that can be used is, all beings are in charge of their own karma. It can help us to develop a respect for another's suffering, right to suffer. And it can help us to feel perhaps more in control of what we're actually in control of. So we'll take a final couple of moments of silence to explore how that might impact or affect our habit energy and how it might heighten our ability to remain in balance. Again, thank you all for trusting me with this time, and let's take a moment to recognize the effort and compassion and the gift that you've given yourself to spend this time in community, in Sangha, in practice. So, may this practice, may the compassion and awareness and capacity to understand that we've developed in community today and throughout all the years of this practice and all the other beings who are practicing today, may the merit and the benefit of that practice serve all beings everywhere. And may all beings everywhere be free from suffering or learn to suffer in a way that fits their capacity. Thank you all for practicing with me today. Namaste.